Welcome back to another episode of Think, Learn, Grow. This is a podcast where we focus on self improvement, improving ourselves, becoming the best version of ourselves, and we break down different topics that can all help us along our journey or begin our journey, or help us just continue to help one another. It's really about building community and making it a safe environment for everyone to grow. It's definitely a pleasure to be back. It's always great. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. Be sure to tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend, because again, we want to grow this out so that we all can grow and become better versions of ourselves. That's ultimately what we all desire to do. We may not outwardly say, I want to be a better person. Every day, we're striving to do better than we did yesterday, whether we like it or not, whether we uh, try to or not. We're ultimately always looking to get better. No one wakes up and says that they don't want to be better. No one wakes up and says, you know what, actually, I want to do worse than what I did yesterday. We all want to improve. We all want to do better. And that's what we want to focus on today. And today's topic is in reference to the science of habits, creating and maintaining positive changes. We want to be able to make change every day. We understand that change is the only constant. Everything is changing at all times. We're always in a constant trajectory of change. Whether we want to change, our environment is changing, and our environment shapes us. Our environment is stronger than our own self sometimes. So we want to make sure that we understand and respect change, and that we don't look down on change, but ultimately we look at change as something positive. We want to change. We want to change and make decisions. We've changed over the years. The way we used to think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even yesterday has changed. Now, whether it's changed for the positive or so-called negative, that's based off of the thoughts that we have. That's based off of the actions that we execute, which ultimately fuels those habits that we form. Those habits then, over time, shape our character. So we're going to talk about that aspect of it today in the science of habits. What is habit formation? The psychology of what a habit is and how we go about creating new habits, breaking old habits. What are those habits that we need to add into our life or to develop or form in our life that's going to help us continue to grow, continue to change, continue to evolve into the best version of ourselves? So let's get into it. Again, thank you and welcome back to the Think, Learn, Grow podcast, where we're thinking to try to find a way to learn, where we learn and create an opportunity to grow. And we understand that growing is only possible if we're striving not to actually die. Everything that's not growing is dying, right? We know that dying is a natural process. But while we are alive, we want to strive to grow. We want to strive to evolve. We want to strive to improve. So that's why this is the Think, Learn, Grow podcast. So let's get right into it. Let me get a little bit of this water, and we're going to get right into it. So habit formation. Let's talk about the psychology that goes into habits. I want to read this here. This is the psychology of habits. It says that the psychology of habits is based on the idea that habits are formed through a process of learning and repetition. One, habit loops, a psychological pattern that describes how habits form with three steps. One, cue, a trigger that promotes the brain to go into automatic mode. Two, routine, the behavior itself. And three, reward, helps the brain decide if the habit loop is worth remembering. We have associative learning. When a simple action is repeated in a consistent context, the action becomes associated with that context. We have context dependent repetition. When a cue is reliably associated with an action, the action becomes reinforced. Cognitive efficiency. Habits free mental resources for other tasks. Then persistence. Habits can persist even after the initial motivation or interest is gone. Some examples of habits includes brushing your teeth, making coffee, or taking out the trash. So let's look into and let's break down habits, right? So we know that everything starts with a thought. Everything starts with a thought. YouTube was someone's thought first. This microphone was in their mind. It was a thought first. Then over time, they took that thought and began to take action. Action repeated is a habit. Those habits then fuel or form or shape character, right? They also can shape matter, right? So we understand that it starts with the thought. And habits are what we do on a repeated basis, as we talked about or read in this particular text here, is based off of learning and repetition, right? So if you have the habit of exercising, one, you had to learn that there's a benefit in taking that action. Over time, the more that you exercise, the more that you go out and run, the more that you go to the gym and lift weights, hit the treadmill, do the cardio, do the ab work, you then begin to develop a habit of going where you don't think about it. It's something that you do routinely. It's something that you do automatically, right? So it spoke on cues are a trigger that prompts the brain to go into automatic mode. So what is a cue? Let's think of a cue like an alarm, right? When that alarm goes off in the morning, it may be your habit to get up and drink a glass of water when you first start off. It may be a cue for you to, when you wake up in the morning, first thing when you open your eyes, to thank God. That could be your cue. You had that alarm go off, your eyes opened up. Now you're triggered to pray. You're triggered to be grateful. You're triggered to drink water. You're triggered to go to the restroom. You're triggered to get up and stretch. You're triggered to do whatever it is that you habitually do every time that particular action takes place, or that alert, that trigger is set off, right? So everything starts there. So we have a cue, then we have the actual action itself, the routine, what we actually do, right? And then we get into the reward. The reward is the part what actually helps us cement a habit in our life, right? Sometimes the reward or the consequence, and I use the word consequence because consequence can typically be used in a negative sense, right? Typically when we hear the word consequence, we think negative, but consequence is just the result. It's just the end result of something that is done, whether it's positive or negative. The consequence of getting up and going exercise is that you become stronger, you become faster, you become better, you become more alert, you become more happier. Your health is benefit. That is the consequence of getting up and exercise. The same way the consequence for not doing so is that you may become weaker. You begin to be more stressed. You begin to see and develop certain parts of your body that you don't like the way they develop. They're not developing in the direction that you want them to, right? That's the consequence. So consequence has a positive and negative direction that it can go in, but the word consequence itself is not a negative word. So I'm using this word, and I, as a habit, strive to use certain words and be able to expand my mind by using different words and language so that I can build the habit of understanding that words in itself are not negative, but the way that I may perceiving it or the way that I may be using it without context can assume to be negative or positive. So I have to be sure to use them more regularly. I have to repeat these words or use different words on a regular basis in order to form a habit of developing my vocabulary, right? So when we think about rewards, I want to get back to that, right? When you create a situation where you reward yourself for doing a said action that you said you want to do, it then helps you do that action more and more, which makes it a habit, because you know that if I get this particular cue, I have this alarm set. When I get up and actually commit and execute on the action that is triggered by this cue, I'm going to get this reward, right? You may have a reward of being able to, you know what, because I did my exercise this morning, I'm gonna make sure I reward myself uh, by taking some time out to celebrate myself, right? You reward yourself by, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead now that I've done everything I needed to do for myself. I'm going to reward myself by listening to some music and enjoying myself, right? I'm going to take myself out to dinner, right? Instead of cooking, I'm gonna go to that favorite restaurant that I have, right? There's different ways of rewarding yourself. You could reward yourself. You know what? Some of us who work very hard, we have to reward ourselves with taking a break, right? Taking a nap. Okay, I got the 10 tasks that I have for today, I got them all completed. I'm building a habit of executing and completing my to-do list. So I'm going to reward myself by taking a nap. I'm going to reward myself by watching that movie that I said I was going to watch. I'm going to reward myself by enjoying some time in nature or going for a walk. These are different ways to help you reward yourself for doing whatever you've committed yourself to do on a regular basis so that you can develop the habit of doing so. And the more that you do it, the less likely that you need the reward in order to do the habit because you've now done it so many times that it's become automatic. And that's really the ultimate goal. We want to have healthy habits to become an automatic part of our behavior. This is what our character is built on. It becomes a part of our very being that we do these certain actions, that we commit to these certain routines, that we follow through and execute on these particular actions on a daily, regular, and consistent basis because we know that these habits are going to help us become a better version of ourselves. That is the ultimate reward, is becoming the best version of ourselves. So that's why we want to develop the right habits. That's why we want to break the unhealthy habits or the non-productive habits that we may have that may be contributing to the detriment of our growth, right? So let's get into this a little bit further as far as building positive habits, right? So let's think about the benefits of it. We just talked about the ultimate goal is to become the best version of ourselves, right? So what better reason to develop a positive habit? But in order to develop positive habits, we first have to start to look at what are we currently doing? What are our current habits? And is what we're doing now positive or negative? If we have the habit of going to the same fast food restaurant every day, getting the same food that we know is not helping us lose weight or not helping us remain and stay healthy, if we have the habit of um, taking the closest parking spot in order to get inside of a particular building, right, where we could develop the habit of parking further away each time we go to a particular place in order to get more steps in, that can then become a positive habit for ourselves, right? Because we're developing actions on a regular basis that's going to push us forward. The whole point of a positive habit is to make it progressive. It's about being progressive. It's about advancing ourselves. It's about evolving into a better version of ourselves, right? So let's think of a strategy about doing that, right? The first thing that we have to talk about, which we spoke on earlier, is start to develop and focus on more positive thoughts. The more positive that we think, right? And it's not to say that we have to just always be in a happy, good mood, right? That's not necessarily a realistic, but we don't want to focus on the negative more than we focus on the positive. It is said that we may have anywhere from 30 to 40 to 60,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of those thoughts are negative. But do we choose to focus on that 80% or do we focus on the 20% of positive thoughts, right? It takes a bit of effort. It takes some energy to be more positive. It takes some uh, initiative in order to be positive, especially in a world that is negative, especially when we're bombarded with negative news and negative feedback. But it's rewarding to focus on something positive. So the more we think positive, the more we'll be inclined to do something more positive, right? So the actions become positive. So now we have to look at our actions on a regular basis. What actions am I executing on, right? What actions am I doing? When you start to look at that, you start to develop more positive actions. So one of those actions could be talking to yourself more positively. You can start developing and may want to strive to develop the habit of speaking to yourself more kindly, speaking to yourself more positively, starting your day off by actually thanking God for the opportunity to wake up and do better. And instead of condemning ourselves about what mistakes we may have made yesterday, we can encourage ourselves that we're going to improve today and we're going to strive to do better tomorrow. Right. So the more that we do that, we begin to form the habit, which is a positive habit of just being more positive, having a more positive self-talk, right? So that is very important. And excuse me, let me get some more water as I feel like my throat is very dry. So I apologize. So again, it's about developing positive habits. So different strategies have to do with that, which we talk about this a lot on this particular podcast, but sometimes we just need to change our environment. Some of the habits that we have formed may be based off of the environment that we're in. Some of the habits that we may have may be based off of the people that we choose to associate with as well. We begin to adapt. We begin to take on the habits of other people because that's something that we associate with. We talked about earlier when we was reading about the psychology of habits, and we said associative learning. When a simple action is repeated in a consistent context, the action becomes associated with that context. So at one time I used to, I used to smoke weed. I used to drink alcohol, right? But I only had the desire to drink alcohol when I was in certain social environments that alcohol was present. I didn't necessarily think about drinking alcohol all the time. But when I was in a certain area, when I felt like, okay, I'll go to the bar or I'll go to the club, I see everybody drinking. So there becomes you associate going to the club or going to the party or pre-gaming or when everybody that gathers together before we go out, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna drink. So it becomes a habit. The same thing with smoking weed, if that's what you do. So when I used to smoke, I used to go to a studio, used to work and do music on a regular basis. But it became a habit that when we went to the studio, that's what we had to do. We had to roll up, get ourselves together. We listened to certain music, play some beats and things like that. And that was a part of our routine or our habit to get us in the so-called mood to create, right? So this is how associative learning works. So now let's rewire that for something positive, right? So now let's figure out what we need to form a more positive habit. So what we may need to do to associate ourselves with a positive habit of going to exercise is that maybe we need to set out our clothes, pick out our shoes, have everything ready so that we know that when we wake up and we see our shoes and the socks and the clothes that we're going to wear to the gym or to go work out, we associate that with being able to exercise. So that becomes easier for us to do it. And then the more that we do it, it becomes habit or becomes automatic for us to be able to commit to as well. Let's talk about breaking habits, right? Breaking bad habits. And we want to discuss a few techniques to identify and break negative habits and replacing them with positive ones. What is a bad habit? So, bad habits is anything that is destructive to your ability to improve and grow. This is the Think, Learn, Grow podcast where we'll focus on self improvement. So, anything that is not helping you self improve, anything that's not helping you evolve, that's not progressing you forward, anything that's not helping you get to your goals, anything that's stopping you from being a better version of yourself is considered a bad habit, right? So if your goal is to be more healthy, then going to that fast food restaurant could be a bad habit. If being wanting to get into more exercise, then hitting that snooze button when that alarm goes off 3 or 4 times can be a bad habit. If we have the goal to read more books, then choosing to procrastinate or choosing to not sit down and take the time out to be able to read can be a bad habit. But how do we go about breaking the bad habit? Well, they say that it takes 21 to 30 days in order to develop a new habit, right? Me personally, I like to focus on the fact that there's really only 2 days, the day that we start and the day that we don't stop. That's how we break the new habit. But we have to replace it, right? So we have to first focus on what are the benefits of breaking this habit? What are the benefits of forming the new habit? What are the cons? What is the negative components associated with keeping the bad habit? What is the consequence for not developing the positive habits, right? That then aligns our mind to say, you know what, this what I'm doing on a regular basis is not helping me get to my goal. I'm so dissatisfied with who I am today that I have to break this habit in order to get to the next level. And the more that we focus on why it's beneficial to do something, the easier it is to do it. So that's how we break bad habits. We have to understand and look at it for what it is. And the more clearer it becomes in our mind as to why this is not productive, why this is negative, why this is bad, why this is not helping us, the easier it is to break it. Because we begin to realize that, hey, I'm saying that I want to get to from point A to point B, but I have this roadblock in front of me that I ultimately put there. So I have the ability to remove it. It's not as if I put this here and it is permanent. There is no habit that is permanent. Everything that we develop that has a habit can be changed, whether it's positive or negative. We see that every day. When we aren't consistent in whatever we're doing, we will begin to cause that habit to be removed, whether it's positive or negative. So we have to be actively working towards it. Something that we have to understand that there's action that has to take place. Think, learn, grow is basically that, right? You have the thought, the action, the result, right? Everything is thought, action, result. The more that we think, we do, and we see the results, the easier it becomes to develop the habit, right? So everything is based off of habits. Again, our character is formed and shaped by our habits. If we want to have a better character, then we have to, if we want to develop better character, then we have to develop better habits, which means that we have to develop better actions, which comes from developing and focusing on better thoughts. So it's all about starting with the mind. The mind is so powerful. Everything is 90% mental, 10% action. It's 90% what you do about what happens to you and 10% about what happens to you, right? What are you going to do about it? How are you going to respond? So when you start to see yourself leaning in the direction that is toward a bad habit, you have to check yourself. This is why self-examination is so important. This is why being mindful is so important. This is why taking time out to sit and think about what it is that is taking place. Being able to take the time out to really develop a self starts with zooming out, not focusing so much on what's going on right now, but zooming out to say how is this helping or hindering my progress going forward. That then helps us break those bad habits. That then helps us develop more positive habits. And the more that we get into that process of zooming out, examining ourselves, studying ourselves, and seeing what works and what doesn't work, we begin to then put things in their proper place. We begin to prioritize things that much better in order to get to our ultimate goal. So the science of habits, it starts with the mind. From the mind, it then becomes actions. Those actions repeated over time becomes those habits. So what habits are you going to break today? What habits are you going to develop today? What thoughts are you going to have? What actions are you going to take? I want to leave us on this before we close out. I've been focused on these three words: be, do, have. In order for me to have what it is that I want, I have to do certain actions. These actions are based off of what I need to become in order to do that. I have to become a better version of myself. That is what I want to be. So if I want to be the best version of myself, what would the best version of myself do? When I do what the best version of myself would do, I would then be able to acquire what the best version of myself is setting out to acquire. So be, do, have. If you're being a more positive person and you start doing more positive things, you will have more positive interactions, right? So being a person that is focused on self-improvement requires us to do more things that will push us forward and do more things that is going to contribute to our self-improvement so that we can have what we are looking to get from being a more self-improved individual. So be, do, have. Let's be better. Let's do better so that we can have better. So again, thank you. Welcome back to the Think, Learn, Grow podcast. This has been a beautiful conversation focused on the science of habits, the importance and the ability to create and maintain positive change. We know that change is the only constant. So are you going to change for the better today? Think, learn, grow. If you're thinking, you're going to find an opportunity to learn. If you're learning, you're creating an opportunity to grow. And anything that's not growing is dying. That can be your mindset. That could be those positive habits that you are trying to develop. If you're not growing and taking action intentionally, taking the initiative to change, you could be killing off those good habits that you have. It could be your finances. It could be your relationships. It could be your intelligence. So let's always find ourselves striving to improve. Let's always find ourselves striving to form and shape and maintain more positive habits so that we can make it closer to that end goal of becoming the best version of ourselves. I appreciate you tapping into the Think, Learn, Grow podcast. As always, it's your brother, Mr. West, tapping in with you. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, follow us on social media, and be sure to leave your feedback and tell somebody to tell somebody that this actually helped you out. And if it has, please let me know that it helped you out. If you have any feedback, feel free to give us the feedback because we always want to grow. We always want to improve and we want to hear from you. So tap in, family. It is your brother, Mr. West, tapping in with you. Until next time, think, learn, grow.